We're going to talk a little bit about tree growth and structure. So I've got this tree on the back of my property. It's basically broken into a couple of sections. You've got the main body of it, which is the trunk, this section here. You've got the root system, which is below the ground and you can't see. And then you've got the branches and the leaves up the top, which is called the crown of the tree. Now, generally, you might think of the very top of the tree right up here as the crown, but basically where all the branches start, that's known as the crown area. The roots in the ground suck up minerals and water, and they turn them into a solution, and they send them up through the tree through the sapwood, which is the new growth wood on the inside of the tree, and it sends it up to all the leaves and the branches of the tree. The leaves, when the sunlight hits them, goes through a process called photosynthesis, and that only works when there's actually chlorophyll in the tree's leaves. That turns all of that sap that's in the tree into sugar and starches, and then that sends that sort of food back down through the tree. That comes down through the live bark and cambium layer right underneath the outside edge of the tree. That's one of the reasons why if you ring bark a tree, where you chop off all the bark all the way around the outside, you can actually kill the tree because it doesn't get to send the food back down to the bottom of the tree. As well as basically getting the minerals and the water from the soil, the roots basically are the anchor point for the tree, and it basically helps to keep it safe in the elements. When a tree is growing, once the wood is formed by heartwood, as soon as that's formed, it'll stop growing, and all of the growth happens just on the outside in that cambium layer where the live bark is. Now, that tree doesn't look like it's got much of bark on it, but there is bark around it. I'm going to take you to a bit of a log, and we'll see if we can get some more information out of that. So here we've got a couple of samples of logs, and they basically demonstrate some of the sections of the tree. You can see the difference in colour in this part here. This little light section here, this area is known as the sapwood. That's the newest wood, and that's understandably because it's out towards the outside of the tree. The heartwood is this centre section. The heartwood ends up changing colour as it grows, or as it hardens, and it hardens because all of the food chambers inside them basically start to get blocked, and they block up and they start forming tannins and resins and all that sort of stuff on the inside of the tree, and this part hardens up. This is the part that's the best bit of the wood for use. Sapwood tends to always still be soft because it's still full of food and sugar, and this is the section that a lot of bugs try and go for, which you can see in this one. When you see you might be able to see all of the borer trails all over this tree, because they were going through and eating the yummiest part of the wood, which was the live bark or the sapwood right under the edge of the tree. You can see this one, this was the bark, and everything was happening right underneath it. So the only actual part of a tree that is growing is this section here, right in between the thick hard bark on the outside and the sapwood on the inside. And there's a layer in here known as the cambium layer, and the cambium layer has two types of cells. It has live bark cells on the outside edge, and it has new wood cells on the inside, and they basically create, you can see on this one I've actually painted because I was trying to get it to stop cracking as it dried, but you can see the growth rings in here, and each one of these rings is a season of growth. The wider rings are the summer growth, when the tree is growing really fast and the cells are bigger. Winter rings are the darker ones because the tree slows down growing, and its cells are a lot smaller and tighter packed together, and they basically form a darker ring. So every ring is like a winter ring, summer ring, winter ring, summer ring, and you can basically count those to find out how old a tree is. This centre section, usually about 1 centimetre in size, when it's just the pith in the centre. It's called the pith or the medulla. This very centre section of the tree, it's basically soft and pulpy and useless because, as you can see, it usually rots out of logs. That's why you find hollow logs without having been bored through, and so the inside is basically rotted out. In terms of food travelling from this part of the tree to this part of the tree, there's medullary rays in the tree that basically travel horizontally through the log, and they bring food in and out. Now there's some trees where the medullary rays show up really nicely, so things like silky oak and banksia really show up the medullary rays really strongly. A lot of trees you'll barely see them. As those medullary rays basically stop transferring fruit and block up, that's what causes that heartwood. Now you can see on this one, still got the bark on this. Now the outside bark is also known as dead bark. It's basically there to protect the tree and to protect those inner layers that are always still growing. Some trees will shed their bark, and then as the tree's growing, because the new live bark on the inside will turn into dead bark, the new live bark on the inside will turn into dead bark, and it basically continues to shed the bark as the tree grows. Some trees don't shed their bark, their stuff just gets taken off through weathering and that sort of stuff. This one you can really see the heartwood here and the sapwood towards the outside, and then you've got this layer here, which is where the tree was actually growing. So you've got wood cells on the inside, bark cells on the outside, and that was where it was growing right there. A really important point to remember about wood is that once the wood is formed anywhere in a tree, once it's formed, it doesn't grow any further. It doesn't get longer, it doesn't get wider, anything like that. Only new cells are responsible for the tree growing. So once this part grows, it's not going to move anywhere. When a branch grows out of a tree, you'll notice that the branches don't move up the tree. They stay at the same height. There's no movement there. If you were to drive a nail into the side of a tree, it will always be at the same height. It will never move anywhere because the tree does not grow upwards like that. Now if we take this part of a tree, for example, that's right down the back, we can see new growth. The very tips and the very extremity, very end extremity of the tree. Right in here, you can see a little bud. That's basically the branch growing out. And what happens is the cells at the very end of branches basically divide and continue to grow. And that's the only way a tree grows upwards. So this will slowly grow upwards, and then as that forms, the bark on the outside continues to grow those cells. So underneath this layer of bark, there will be cells, and the branch will slowly grow thicker and thicker and thicker. But the only distance in terms of height or length of branch is from the very tip of the tree. So trees will grow up by these little tips at the very top growing upwards, and they'll grow outwards from these little tips growing outwards, and then the tree branches will grow thicker as there's new cells basically growing. And this here is another perfect example of that. Brand new growth, all nice and green, slowly growing up. Here's a little tip here that's continuing to grow upwards. Okay, now it's your turn to demonstrate to me what you know about tree growth and structure. Use a PowerPoint, some other form of presentation, a Word document, use a video, use Publisher, whatever. Show me what you've learnt about tree growth and structure now.